Hey guys, and welcome to another episode. Today in this video, I'm going to show you how to replace a faulty thermostat on your car. So my Nissan 240 behind me has a broken thermostat. What the problem with it is that the thermostat is stuck open. So all the coolant that is found in the thermostat and in the engine can circulate as it pleases. So it's always on an open loop. Realistically, when you start your car up, you want to have it on a closed loop so the coolant only circulates in the engine itself and doesn't cool down by going through the radiator. Now, the problem that I have is that because it's stuck open, the engine cannot actually get up to a decent temperature. So the temperature never actually reaches the operating temperature. It's always cold no matter what I do. I can beat on the car, I can let it sit and do whatever, and it does not want to rise in temperature. So by replacing your thermostat, you will be able to get that problem solved. Now that is with a stuck open thermostat. If it's stuck closed, you could run into overheating problems. Now, regardless of whichever situation you have, those are both not ideal, and it's not too difficult of an install to replace this little doohickey right here. This is the thermostat that we're going to be installing on the car. Now, I'm also going to be installing a few other components to make life easier. So these silicone hoses that I have from HPS are also going to be installed while we're doing this process. I'm going to be installing the thermostat, both new silicone hoses, and also a new rad cap. These components on the vehicle are okay, but it is a good idea after the car gets to a certain age to start replacing some components that are still working fine but will eventually go soon. So the standard rubber hoses that I have on the car are 20 years old. So these new silicone ones are not only better, but they won't deteriorate like the rubber ones. The rad cap will slowly go on you, and the same thing kind of goes for the thermostat. So if you can go ahead and replace all this while you're at it, you're going to be doing your car good. Once we have everything here installed, we're going to be putting some new coolant inside the car to freshen things up. So let's get started and disconnect some components in the vehicle to get access to all of this.
The first part that I'm going to begin to remove is the air intake. So there's going to be two bolts found on the top of the intake that need to be removed, and those are both securing the pipe down onto the chassis of the car. Once you have that removed, there's going to be a clamp on each end of the pipe that needs to be removed so we can remove the pipe from the car. There's going to be an additional two hose clamps that are clamping down two vacuum lines that are leading to the air intake that need to be removed so we can take off this large intake pipe. Once you have that disconnected, we can pretty much pull the entire thing up and out and remove the intake pipe from the engine. Once you have the pipe removed, it's not a bad idea to clog each one of the holes that are now open with a rag or something like that just to prevent any debris from entering. Moving on, there's going to be two electrical connectors found above one of the coolant pipes that need to be disconnected so that we can remove this coolant pipe that's leading from the engine to the radiator. It's pretty simple, just push down on the little connector and pull it out. With those removed, you can use a 10mm socket to remove the clamp that's securing the hose up to the end of the coolant line. On the other end of that coolant line, there's going to be another 10mm bolt that needs to be removed. That clamp holds down the coolant line up to the radiator. Now at this point, they should be loose, but do not completely disconnect them yet. We're going to need to go underneath the vehicle and disconnect the drain plug that's found underneath the rad so we can drain the entire rad from all the coolant. Now this is going to allow us to remove all the pipes later without really spilling much on the ground. You can use a Phillips screwdriver to remove the little plug that's found underneath, and once you have that done, the coolant should drain and flow underneath the car. Now make sure to catch it and don't let it drain on the floor. If you remove the radiator cap, the fluid is going to want to flow out a lot more, so just be ready for it, as I definitely was not. Now if you have a funnel or a spout, it'll make life a lot easier when doing this procedure.
Not gonna lie, I wasn't exactly expecting all of that fluid to come out. I was expecting some, but I didn't think there'd be that much inside the rad. So for next time, and for you guys, if you guys want to do this, instead of making a mess on the ground and having the one thing overflow, get a spout, put it on top of whatever you want to drain the fluid into, and if that fills up, just slide this out of the way and put another one underneath. Learn from my mistakes. Do as I say, not as I do.
With the coolant now evacuated from the car, there's no longer any fluid found in the coolant lines that are leading to the rad or from the rad. That means we can continue to remove the hose clamps that are keeping the hoses onto the rad and the engine. Once you loosen them up, you should be able to pull them off. Now, if they are a little bit tricky, I'm using a hook and pick set to remove them and make my life a little bit easier. Since these hoses have been on the car for 20 years, they have rusted on there slightly, so pulling them off is going to be a little bit tricky. But it can be done.
With the upper rad hose now disconnected, we're going to disconnect the lower rad hose. So you can see that it's coming off of this flange here, and the thermostat is actually found inside of there. So we're going to need to get access to that area along with the clamp that's found right here, See a little screw? And the other one that's found on the bottom side of the rad.
With a 10 mil, an extension, and a ratchet, you can remove the hose clamp that's found up at the coolant neck. Once you remove this and loosen it up, you should do the exact same thing found on the opposite side of the coolant hose, and once you do that, some coolant might escape from the cooling system. Be ready for it and catch any residual fluid that's going to come out of the coolant pipes. Once you do that, the coolant pipe should be pretty much good to go. Now again, because this car's 20 years old, my coolant hoses of course are a little bit difficult to remove. So I'm going to have to do something a little bit different.
So this coolant pipe doesn't exactly want to be removed. So what I'm going to do instead of trying to wiggle it off of the neck right here is I'm going to disconnect the 3 bolts that are holding the thermostat housing on top of the actual block. So what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to remove the entire neck. It's going to allow me to take this entire piece off without disconnecting the hose, and I'll be able to get access to the thermostat and replace that too while we're at it. That's the main part while we're doing this job. So if we can get all that done in one shot, I'm laughing.
So to remove this coolant neck, there's going to be 3 10mm bolts that are securing it up to the block. So with an extension and a couple different size sockets, you can remove this. Now because I did not remove the fan shroud, this is going to be slightly tight, but you can get this done. I'm using a deep socket along with a short socket and an extension to remove it. Once you remove all 3 of the bolts, you should be able to pull on the coolant neck and you should have the line and the neck come out in one shot. Now the thermostat will not come out at this point only because the thermostat should be siliconed in place, but if you use a screwdriver or something to pry off the thermostat from the engine, you should be able to remove it.
What I was trying to do with this installed was disconnect this neck from the coolant hose. Now with it off the car, we can slide our little pick around the outside perimeter of it and hopefully break free any kind of stuff that is formed and break free any kind of corrosion that's basically made its way around here and made a seal. If it's really not coming off, you can apply a little bit of penetrating fluid around the outside perimeter of it so that it'll try to sink in and get in between all of this, because right now it's still pretty stuck. Now worst case scenario, if I have to, I can go ahead and cut up this hose because I'm not going to be reusing it. All that I need is this piece here. I don't even need this clamp for that matter. So I can pretty much break it all if worst comes to worst.
But after spending a little bit more time and using a couple swear words, the coolant flange was able to be removed.
So off camera, I cleaned up the entire coolant flange that I have right here. I removed most of the gasket that was found on this surface here, and how I did that was with a razor blade. Just skimmed over top the entire thing. And I also used one of these picks to get in between the little cracks right here. So there's still a little bit of the gasket maker that's still on there, but it's not a big deal because we still have most of it removed. You want to basically have it so that this is pretty much completely clean, so that when we apply our new gasket maker to this surface area right here, it's going to adhere, it's going to fill in these cracks, and it's going to make a perfect seal against the block. In the engine bay, you want to do the exact same thing. So any of this gasket maker that's on there, you want to try and remove as best as you can so you get a good, nice seal between the block and the flange that we have to attach over here. So at this point, we can pretty much install everything back onto the car because we have everything removed. We've cleaned up all the mating surfaces, both for this flange here and for the block. We have the old thermostat removed, and we're going to be installing everything back on the car. So it's very important when you go for the installation procedure that you install the thermostat in the correct direction. So because this little doohickey right here, this is the thermostat, this only operates in one way. So when this gets hot enough, this will actually pull forward and all the fluid that's on one side can flow to the other. Now, if you have it spun this way, this won't be able to open up and circulate all that coolant from the block into the rad and cool down. So after you install your new thermostat, if you notice that your engine is overheating, that is a prime giveaway that the thermostat is not installed in the correct direction. So if you just take 2 seconds when you guys are doing this procedure to make sure that it's put in the correct way, you're gonna be good. So the way that it is for my car is that this is the block, so this is the outside, and all of our other components were found on this side of it. So if you install it like this, you're gonna be good. So I'm gonna begin by just putting this into the block, and then we're going to put that silicone around the entire coolant flange right here, and it's going to seal it up to this. So the thermostat slides in to there, just like that, and you can see that it actually seals into place. Now we're going to install the silicone around the outside of here, and then clamp this on and put our bolts through it. So I've got this tube right here called the Right Stuff 1 minute gasket. So it's a gasket maker. You're gonna chop off the top of this to expose the stuff on the inside. And then this little part that's attached to it goes over top and you thread it in place. And at this point, we're going to be pushing down on the back part of it to push the gasket maker through here. Now, if you have a caulking gun, this makes life a lot easier, but since I don't, I'm just gonna be using it like this. So you can see it coming through the end of the tip.
The right stuff that I'm using here is made for a caulking gun, and since I don't have one, I need someone to help me push all the gasket maker onto the flange because I can't do it all by myself. If you're using a small container, you can do it, but if you're doing what I'm doing, if you plan on doing this, get the caulking gun. It's not expensive. I should have gotten it and it would have made life a little bit easier. But once you have the entire perimeter coated, we're going to apply this onto the car. So once you have it on, you're not going to fully torque each one of the bolts yet. You're going to want to put them all hand tight, and then once you have them all on, you're going to tighten them up to the proper torque. To see the torque spec, if you're curious, it's going to be found in the description box. Now once you have all three of the bolts on there and torqued up, the flange is now on. We can follow it up by installing our new silicone lines on top of there.
Before we go about and do that, I want to be able to have these hoses come on and off very simply. I don't want to have to go through the same effort that we did last time when we were removing the stock hoses from this pipe. So what I'm going to do is apply a little bit of 3M silicone paste on this end here of the coolant flange. You don't need a lot, you just need a little bit to coat it, and then what's going to happen is that this is going to be able to let the hose slide on and off very easily. Now you don't have to worry about it sliding off completely while it's under use because you still have the clamps holding it onto here. And you can see that there's a little flange on the end of it that's a little bit bigger, so it won't actually slide off should there be a lot of pressure this way. You can grab the hose and slide it over top. Now I'm not going to clamp this up yet because I want to have the bottom end also installed before you go and tighten it and make your final position for it.
With the bottom lined up and installed, we can twist the tube to whichever way we want so we can avoid certain components. Now whenever you have it in that good location that you want, you can grab either an 8mm socket or a flathead screwdriver to tighten up the clamp and secure it in place. You're going to want to do this exact same procedure for the top clamp as for the bottom clamp.
So I'm going to do the same kind of thing. I'm going to put a little bit of 3M silicone paste on the radiator, on the flange right here, and the same thing for this little coolant pipe that's coming from the motor. You don't need much, you just want a little coating on it, and then that'll not only make installing it super easy, but should you want to disassemble it later, that's even easier. And then just like that, this is pretty much done. Slide the clamps over top on each end, and then tighten them up.
At this point, we can remove the rags that are covering the intake. We can attach the two electrical connectors that we removed earlier. We can then reinstall the primary intake pipe up to the throttle body. Then reconnect the vacuum line from the intake to the valve cover, and that is the PCV hose. Following that is the secondary intake pipe that connects to the airbox. There are two additional vacuum lines that need to be attached to that for other parts of the vehicle to work. That will complete the reassembly of the cooling system and the intake. Now that will nearly complete the thermostat replacement procedure. We're almost done, we just have a few more steps to do.
With the cooling system like this, all we have to do next is reinstall the little bolt that goes in the bottom side of the rad, which stops all the fluid from coming out. Now before you could just go ahead and reinstall this, you're going to want to remove the old little O-ring that was found on the end of this, and you're going to want to replace it with a new one. Now I'll be including a link in the description box for a kit that includes a whole assortment of different O-rings, because this one right here, I'm not sure if you can tell that well. I'll get the camera to zoom in, but it is very deteriorated and very old. So it is a pretty good idea to replace them since you have this out and you won't be losing any coolant at this point.
Now comes filling the entire cooling system with coolant. So I'm going to be attaching this special device on the top of the radiator so I can allow this spout to be attached to it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put our coolant directly into this container, and then by pulling the top part of it, it's going to allow all the coolant that's found inside of the spout to drain into the rad. We want to fill the rad completely with coolant so there's no air pockets or bubbles or anything left inside of there. That way the cooling system is going to be able to work as best as it can. For my car, I use the entire container of coolant that I have right here that's pre-mixed 50-50 to fill up my rad. That's how much came out, so I have to replace it with exactly that much fluid. As soon as the spout stops bubbling and the coolant stays resting, you're going to grab your plug, put it in the center of the spout, and if there's any excess coolant inside the spout, you can lift it up and put it back into your container. After that, you can remove the radiator cap adapter and you can install your new rad cap over top. This is going to complete the procedure, and then all we have to do next is turn the vehicle on, let the system bleed by itself, and then you're good to go. Once you're done this entire procedure, it's not a bad idea to check on your coolant reservoir to make sure that it's not low. Now, if you replaced all the coolant that you removed, you should be good. If it's low, top it up, and then you're going to be on your ways. When the cooling system starts to build up pressure, any excess pressure or air is going to vent out from the cap. So as soon as you put your coolant in the car, it's going to bleed itself. So take the car for a drive, let the coolant get up to operating temperature, and it's going to bleed itself. To make sure it's fully bled too, turn your heat on the inside of the vehicle on high heat so that the coolant inside the heater core can also flow.
After you replaced your thermostat, your rad cap, and the coolant lines that are going to the thermostat, you can also replace the coolant lines that are going to and from your heater core. So the HPS kit that I used to replace the hoses that are going to the radiator, that comes with all the hardware and the hoses that you need to get that done. They have many different platforms that they have different coolant lines for. So whether if it's for your radiator or if it's for your heater core, depending on your car, they will have a kit for your car. So for my 240, for instance, they have both the coolant lines for the radiator and the heater core. They have the same kind of thing for my Honda Accord, and I actually showed you guys in a previous video how to do that. If you guys want to see that video, you guys can check the description box. I'll have a link directing you guys right to that video if you're interested. Now at this point, that will complete the entire procedure. The cooling system is going to be bled. The thermostat is going to be replaced, and we also have new silicone lines installed on the car. If you guys want to pick up any of the products that I use today, you guys can check the description box. I have links directing you right to Amazon. It makes life super easy when you guys want to do this exact same procedure for your car. If you guys want to pick up the tools, the parts, anything, it's going to be down there. If you guys have any other questions for that matter, throw it down in the comment section below, and I'd be more than happy to help. Again guys, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.